So may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Please take your seats. I sort of hate that every sermon I've preached recently has been. Do you know? I saw it on Facebook the other day, but I'm afraid I'm going to give you another one of those. When you're in lockdown, what else can you do but watch Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth? But I saw it was a discussion. It was a discussion about U.S. politics, and I'm going to try and not get political even while I talk about some political players here. That said, do you know who doesn't go running around saying that he's doing the will of God? Jimmy Carter. And do you know who's doing the will of God? Jimmy Carter. that jumps to mind when I hear the gospel, because isn't it interesting? Who do people say that I am? Well, some say you're Elijah, some say you're John the Baptist come back, some say the Messiah will be this and that. Who do you say that I am? Well, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Well, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because nothing's revealed this to you except my Father who is in heaven. And because of that, I'll give you the keys to the kingdom. You'll bind it on earth, it'll be bound in heaven. You'll loose it on earth, it'll be loosed in heaven. Then Jesus said, but don't tell anybody. Have you ever wondered why he did that? Certainly as a child, as a child and a young man, I thought, why would he do that? And I was brought up Baptist, We were supposed to go tell people about Jesus. We were supposed to, and Anglicans, we tend to be a little bit more reticent about that. Well, everybody is an Anglican, everybody wants to be an Anglican, already is one. but actually, even Anglicans in theory are supposed to go tell people about Jesus. But I was raised in an evangelistic church and denomination where you were supposed to tell people the good news. That's why that's why it's named that. It's good news. If it's to be news, you have to tell people. And I thought, well, why on earth did Jesus not say, go and tell people if you've realized this big thing? Go and tell people. I was wondering why. There's several other sections of the Bible where Jesus cautions them to not tell people. Go away. I've healed you now. Go away and be quiet. And even at his trial, are you the Messiah? Well, you say that I am. This has been the rumor, and now you're repeating it to me and holding me to trial for it. But he never actually comes outright and says, yes, I am the Messiah. Why do you think that would be? Well, let's think about the people that we know through history, and even in the current situation, that have proclaimed themselves with words like the Messiah. The 2016 U.S. presidential election. What does Donald Trump say? We've got all these murderers and rapists coming over from Mexico. We've got this, we've got that, we've got the other. And I alone can fix it. Those were his exact words. I alone can fix it. Has he done that? Has he fixed what's wrong with America? Or has he simply sown division? And again, I'm not trying to, I don't think anybody in this congregation has the American vote, so I'm not trying to influence your votes here, because you don't have them. But I ask you the question, as third-party outsiders, has he fixed the problems with America? Well, then he set a pretty high bar for himself, didn't he? I alone can fix it. Who else can fix things? Putin? Mussolini? I almost hate to say it, Hitler. It's so obvious. Who alone can fix these things? Sorry? Well, God can fix these things, yes. Exactly. And I think there's something about that in what Jesus said. And I think there was something about that with the Jimmy Carter thing. Jimmy Carter was not considered in his day to be a particularly effective president. And in history, he was not considered to be an effective president. It was often said that he was too good to be able to manage the presidency particularly well. But do you know what he's done in his post-presidency? And we're talking about a man who was governor of Georgia in 1971, who was an anti-segregationist. That in itself is a fairly amazing thing when you look back on it. He's gone out, he's devoted his life to charitable causes. He goes out and at 90-some-odd years old and builds houses with his bare hands for people, for Habitat for Humanity. He has been a mediator and a negotiator and a special envoy for the United States, for Democratic and Republican presidents, to try and make peace in the world. He's had an incredible ex-presidency. And yet, you know what else he does? He goes to church every Sunday in his little tiny Baptist church in his little tiny South Georgia town, Plains. And do you know what he does? He teaches Bible study, Sunday by Sunday, at his little church. And he did so even when he was in Washington, D.C. And he doesn't crow about it. Quite the opposite. He seems to be the most humble ex-president that we've got. But he goes about his business, and you see the holiness in him. And I say this as a public figure. I can think of other public examples who aren't political at all. I can think of Bill Gates, for example. Bill Gates, and I don't know much about his personal life, so I don't know exactly how holy he is. But who remembers in the late 80s and the early 90s the great debate over which was better, Apple or PC? Do you remember those? Any of you? Some of you were computer people and some of you were not. But it was a fiery debate between people who were partisans of Apple computers and Macs and people who were partisans of Windows. Windows 95 is Mac 84, we used to say. And there's somebody who knows what I meant. And you know what? And I've, as you've guessed, probably from things that I've said around and about the church, I was always an Apple partisan. I could not stand Microsoft Corporation. I had a visceral hatred of it. I still don't use Microsoft products, actually. And Bill Gates was the devil. Bill Gates was the devil. But you know what? Actually, post being CEO of Microsoft, he founded a charitable foundation that brings water to poor countries, to people who have no water, no running water for their toilets, no running water for their houses. He brings solar power and solar energy to places. He is big on climate change. He strong arms other billionaires into giving away most of their wealth. Because what could you possibly need with $1 billion? What could you possibly buy for yourself personally for $1 billion? And he doesn't talk about his greatness. He just quietly goes about his business, speaking up on the things that he needs to speak up on, and then quietly going about his business. Steve Jobs died. Steve Jobs was the creator of the Apple computer. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Steve Jobs died of liver cancer, having moved to another state to get higher up on a transplant list, Tennessee, that he had no connection to because he was a California boy. And it's reputed that he was as mean as a snake. But he was the only one that could fix Apple. In fairness, he did that. But he's the only one that could fix Apple. But he's died and left a legacy of being mean and full of himself. And Bill Gates, when he dies, will leave a legacy of having been generous and gracious and leaving the world a better place than he found it. Christ didn't need his people to go out and say, he's the Messiah. Christ didn't need the ego trip that Mr. Trump needs. Christ didn't need people to wear red, Jerusalem great hats again. Christ needed for his disciples to go out and prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. The good news of God is coming to you. God will be your salvation. God will look after you. And is that not the case with all the readings that we've had today? God is your light. God is your salvation. Pray to God. Give your life to God. Do right. Love justice. Look after the widow and the orphan. And this will be your religion, pure and undefiled. The hymn says they will know we are Christians by our love. If you need to force people to believe that you are the Messiah, you ain't it. If you need to force people to believe that your religion, your politics, your whatever, are the things that are going to save the world, they ain't. When you see a holy man or woman, the actions, they proclaim themselves. People followed Jesus, not because his disciples went out proclaiming, here he is, the Messiah. Come get a good look at him. Would you like to buy a hat? Don't laugh. Jesus Christ was the Messiah because he healed the sick. He wiped the mud on the blind man's eyes, and he saw. He heard the cries of the Canaanite woman from last week. She bested him in an argument, and he responded with grace and love and healing. This is why Jesus was the Messiah. We as Christians are called to emulate that example. We as Christians are called to admire that example. We are, as Christians, are required to be that example. One to another, and all of us to the world. And it doesn't mean there isn't time, to discuss theology, to discuss doctrine, to discuss, all the religious-y things. There's a time and a place. But fundamentally, it's not about crowing what we have, but as you said to me this morning, Margaret, giving thanks with humility for all the graciousness that God has given us. The great Rabbi Gamaliel, who trained St. Paul when he was still Saul, urged his fellow rabbis to approach Christians with a very pragmatic test. And it was this. He said, what are we going to do about these Christians? What are we going to do about them? He said, let them go. Let them go, because if their movement is not of God, it will fizzle itself out and it will do it spectacularly. And if their movement is of God, then there's nothing in the world that will be able to stand in its way. Our call today is to be of God. That simple. Pray that we may be of God, not crow, not force, not push, but be of God. Pray or talk to God. Get your hands a little bit dirty. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor better than yourself. Proclaim Jesus Christ in all that you do and in a few of your words. And that is what will draw people to us, to see that there is good news here, that we do have a Messiah. And I speak these words in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.